You forgot to?
No, I think we stream should be working. Yeah, sorry, give me a second. I forgot to update the titles for our live stream. And I've started a live stream, so.
Hi guys, we're on live stream and he's editing the title of the live stream right now.
Sorry about that. Well, I think when it comes out, I don't know how this works. What does it look like if I've updated it wrongly somehow? Okay, sorry. Today's topic is on boundaries, ladies and gentlemen.
The lines that separate all of us. I'm kidding. Cool.
Okay, so I've no idea what the title says, but I can post-edit it later, I guess. But so welcome everyone to Quick Connect Live. My name is Alex. I have Ethan and I have Jeffers with me. Yes, I know, I can see we're going live now. Okay, cool. So I don't think we have that big a group that we can't go around introducing ourselves. So maybe just a quick introduction so that we all know everyone. We've got some new faces today. So for those of you who are new with us today, the Quick Connect Live is basically a session whereby we come together, we have a chat around a particular topic. So today's topic is boundaries, right? So, well, my name is Alex, my top 5, empathy, individualization, developer, strategic, and learner, right? And boundaries is something that I found very, very interesting. I'm a huge fan of Dr. Henry Cloud's work, so we're going to talk a little bit about that later as well. Ethan, over to you before we
Hi.
go around.
Yes. I don't think I need to read out my top 5, but I'm Ethan. What I focus on is I'm on a quest to solve office politics in general. So I believe that it is something which is solvable, and it's a fun project that I'm working on right now. I focus a lot on cultural stuff, meaning like how different cultures interact with one another, how different people from different cultures actually interact with one another. And I came from, like Alex said, I come from a psychiatry and psychology background, so this is going to be a fun thing for me.
Yeah, I pick his brains all the time. Jeffers?
I am currently learning designer in the civil service, so I can see my top 3 input. So I go around and absorb everything, as well as learn everything that I encounter. More in the area of leadership as well as well-being and self-care. So that's the key topics I'm more passionate about. And yeah, this is a short intro.
Yeah, so Jeffers is here with his learner interaction and input. So whenever I run out of things to say, I'll just hand it over to him and he'll have something to say. So it's always fun. Okay, so I'm just going to go around based on the grid that I see. Winston, maybe quick intro.
Sorry, I was mute just now. Okay. I work in the IT line. I support end users, servers, and networking devices. My top 5 are connectedness, strategic, learner, empathy, and intellection. Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, Winston.
Okay.
Jason.
Hi, my name is Jason. I am from Virginia in the U.S. I am a learning and a leadership and strengths coach. My top 5 are deliberative, intellection, restorative, adaptability, and significance.
Nice. And we have Jenny. I see you have put your top 5 in your name.
Yeah, I don't know how to do the thing behind my screen, so I just put it in my name.
I can help you with that. Let me know.
Okay. I think my computer's too old. I think that's the problem.
Yes, the virtual background is only available for later computers.
Yeah, I think that's what my kids told me. So my top 5 are individualization, relator, input, arranger, and learner. I teach sales at the university here. I live outside of Chicago. And I also run a restaurant with my husband.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Very cool.
Oh,
It's rough right now. in that
Oh,
business.
Yeah, it is very rough in the F&B business there.
Thanks, Jenny. We have Jingming with the Gongcha photo behind him. Must be a bubble tea fan.
Hello, no, run out of background. Hi everybody. Can you guys hear me? Am I very soft?
Yep, you're good.
Loud.
Good, eh?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Jingming. You guys can call me JM. So actually, I've attended this Strengths Finder before. I think a few years back. A friend of Jun Xiang. Okay. So
yes.
yeah. So it's today happened to scroll by the Meetup app and see this event ongoing. So I just want to join. I don't have the top 5 thingy, or maybe I have, maybe I forgot.
It's okay.
Yeah.
We can help you with that later. But today's topic about boundaries, we don't really need our top 5, but our top 5 would
It's
be interesting
useful.
to look at.
It's useful. It's actually very useful.
I see. Yeah, so I'm just happy to learn from you guys, and yeah.
Thank you. Larry.
Hi, I'm Larry. So my top 5 are 3 of them are actually the same as Jeffers. So I have ideation and I also have futuristic. So I'm really I'm a thinking kind of guy lah. So as you can tell from all the strengths. So because of my input, I think I maintain very varied interest in things from across like organizational stuff, organizational learning, leadership, complexity, like this all over the place. So I'm here today because I have a question actually related to boundaries, and I'm interested to find out more.
Awesome. So we love questions. Keep them coming. We have Rika.
Hi, my name is Rika. I was invited here by Alex. I don't have a top 5, but I love the topic and just here to learn. I'm a researcher and writer. I love all things culture and trends, and I kind of, interestingly, when you talk about boundaries, I find it fascinating to see where boundaries like intersect and how they change and how they're permeable, especially in today's very complicated climate. So I'm very interested to hear what the group has to discuss about this topic.
Very cool. Interesting. Thank you. Leah.
Hi, I'm Leah. Okay, work in the education industry. Okay, my top 5 is context, input, intellection, deliberative, and learner.
Cool. We have majority learners here today, I think.
Yeah.
Thanks, Leah. Ling Jie.
Hi, I'm Ling Jie. I cannot remember my top 5 yet. I guess there is individualization, there is ideation, then significance as well. Then the other 2 I cannot remember. But what interests me is the topic. Now I want to learn more about boundaries. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I think boundaries is a very interesting topic that, every time it comes up, or when you start to get deeper into it, it has a significant impact on people. And I came across the concept of boundaries many years ago, but even then I realized that my concept of boundaries needed constant refinement along the way. So before we dive into the topic, maybe I'd like to hear from all of you. When we talk about boundaries, what comes to mind when we talk about boundaries for you? We will not go round robin, so anyone can just come and chime in at any time. What comes to mind when we talk about boundaries?
I think I will start the ball rolling then. Okay, so for me, boundaries has always been impossible in Asian families. It's something that you grew up. One of my favorite examples of this is a kid saying no when he's full. And then what would a typical tiger mom do? No, eat, right? So there's no such thing as boundaries within Asian families. And the other part is, when your doors are closed at home and your parents just walk right in, that's a boundary transgression right there, right?
Oh,
so
yes.
that's that is boundaries. Boundaries is kind of like your own space, your own control over your own life. That's what I look at boundaries as.
Yep. I didn't want Ethan to go first because this psychiatry trained guy probably has like model answers. How about the rest of you? Okay, I'm going to throw the question. Jenny, what comes to mind when we talk about boundaries?
What comes to mind for me is when people try to boss me around, when they try to tell me to do things that it really isn't their business to tell me to do it. So to me, that's a boundary violation.
Right, and yeah, absolutely right. You have control of yourself, and that's the boundary, knowing where that line is.
Right.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Rika, what's boundaries to you?
Oh, maybe it's because I miss traveling and I'm thinking about geographic boundaries. So I think boundaries also in terms of what gives you, like, keeps people separate and gives people distinction and identity.
Right. Awesome. Thanks. And I'm going to take someone whose video is not on. Leah, what comes to mind when we talk about boundaries?
I'm thinking in terms of privacy.
Like people walking into your room without permission kind of privacy, or?
Yeah, or maybe just talking online.
Okay, yes. Yes. So like maybe like not having someone to see what you're viewing online or something like that. Is that what you mean?
Or purposely like joining your social media account just to see, just to see what you have.
You're talking about stalkers. People are stalking.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Very cool. So for me, boundaries is important because sometimes I feel that parents might enable certain behaviors of children, right? So they get into trouble, right? And then parents come, Superman, Superwoman, come save the kid from the consequences, right? And then that repeats. And what happens is that the kid never learns about the consequence, and therefore they continue engaging in negative behaviors or destructive behaviors, right? So in Dr. Henry Cloud's books, he talks about that as enabling behaviors. I think there's the formal term to it. So when we don't have proper boundaries, and for someone with empathy, right, you see someone who's suffering and you go like, oh, I feel your pain, come let me help you. So that's a boundary violation, right? And that's why I think our talent teams come into play as well. So when we look at that, I see empathy and I see developer. It brings me into that same place whereby I might cross boundaries and attempt to feel better because of empathy, and then I cross those boundaries, and I might also engage, or rather I have the risk of engaging in enabling behaviors for other people. That can be my personal life. That can also happen in professional, right, whereby I help someone do things that they are responsible for. I should just let them take the crap for it, right? So that's where I see boundaries are, and I thought it's an interesting place to start. So what I was thinking, why don't we start with Larry's question, since Larry had a question on boundaries?
Sure. Actually, I wanted to follow up on what you just said, but I guess
we can do that too. Your choice.
Yeah, so I think there is when we're talking about in the specific context you shared earlier of wanting to help somebody, right? This helping relationship is very complex. I think it's complex because there is always that one-upness. Like when you're helping people, you sometimes think of yourself as savior.
Savior complex.
And so I think and you see the relationship is complex because this dynamic is complex because there needs to be other than the inherent so-called violation of boundary, but there is also the perceived inequity of what is the kind of value that you're giving in trying to help somebody. You realize that there are some people who you help, and then they'll be like, oh, thank you. Like, I that was really helpful. And then there's some who are like, who are you? Why are you helping me? why do you perceive that you are helping me? So yeah, anyway, I just wanted to say that because I've been reading a little bit about this thing, and it's led to one of my personal breakthroughs recently. So I thought that was, yeah, I just wanted to share that. But okay, let's come back to the question. So the question is, I understand boundaries theoretically, right? And I mean, I've also been I guess I've violated as much as have my boundaries violated. And I always have this question in the back of my mind, which is, am I justified in feeling hurt?
And do you want to give some background to what led you to feel that way, or what was the situation?
Yeah, so I, maybe because I read too much, so I have a lot of theoretical understanding of different ways to think about it, different models of thinking about personal development and growth. And so one of these schools of thought is also that, I think if you can't remember the name, I think it's you can Google this group called the Arbinger group, and this, I see Ethan nodding furiously. I think he's heard of it. So it's the idea is that if you feel bad, if I can't explain exactly what he was trying to say, but the idea is if you feel bad about somebody crossing a violation, and then you behave in a certain way, it's probably your fault, and that you need to forgive him for you feeling this way. And I think there are others which other schools of thinking Actually, I don't even know whether it's a school of thinking, or maybe it's just a level of different development. Like why are you even hurt in the first place? So yeah, so that's the background. And I think Ethan is trying to say something.
Then I hear you. Harbinger thought is that if you feel like somebody, when you have crossed somebody else's boundaries and you feel hurt by the person saying no to you, then the issue is with you. That is it's actually a reverse way around. That's what they were talking about. So it's about if you cross somebody's boundaries and the person says no to you and you feel hurt, it is your responsibility to apologize for crossing the boundary.
That makes sense. I think a lot of nodding hits. Larry, does that make sense to you?
It does. I'm just trying to recall if that was the actual case.
From what I'm not sure if which exact because what you're referring to is very specific. So I'm trying to go like where's it from? Where do you get it from? But okay, whatever it is, right? I think in agreement from just the nods. I think in general, if somebody violates your boundaries and you feel hurt by it, I don't think anybody here feels like it is unwarranted for you to feel hurt by it. True? Like if somebody crosses into your boundaries, go into your physical space, if you feel uncomfortable, I don't think anybody wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Like if it's my boundary, I've set already in place, right? It's my right to say, no, I don't want this. I think that's an agreement. So I shouldn't be apologizing for setting a boundary in that sense. Does it make sense?
Yeah. So I can agree with that. Yeah, I can agree with that part where if somebody has violated your boundaries, then it's not, you don't have to, it doesn't make sense to apologize to somebody else. Yeah.
So I'm hearing two things, right? When we talk about boundaries, one is the ability to draw your boundaries for people. The other one is about how we need to be able to respect other people's boundaries. Like how many times when someone says no to you and then you either feel offended, or you invalidate that person's boundaries by saying, no, you don't feel that way, or no, it shouldn't be the way. Or just like what Ethan said, right? When you say no to your parents for the food that they've cooked, and they go like, no, you must eat more. So that's kind of, how do we respect other people's boundaries? So maybe just a quick poll. How many of you have more challenge with, so I'm going to compare the two, the challenge between being able to set boundaries, or do you have more challenge being able to respect other people's boundaries? So which is more for you? So quick raise of hands. How many of you have challenges with setting boundaries for yourself? Let's kind of raise hands. Oh, wow. Okay, so setting boundaries is one. Winston, no issues. I can't tell Lindsay and Leah whether the response is. Okay. How many of you have problems with respecting other people's boundaries? I'm very honest. That happens to me at times, and I'll explain why. Okay, so just Larry and me, right? So
okay, so to
maybe,
be clear, it's not so much of respecting it. It's more of like when I'm aware that I'm transgressing the boundary. I'm like, oh, okay, I think I should stop.
yeah, and it's that awareness, right? Sometimes.
Yeah.
And,
it's that sometimes I'm just not aware.
Okay, so to not embarrass myself any further, I think we'll talk about setting boundaries and why some of us have problems setting boundaries.
I just want to say this. I don't think most of us here would ever know when we're crossing boundaries, which is also one of the reasons why, especially for Asian culture, a lot of things that I've experienced is I don't even know that I crossed somebody's boundaries because it was not set. Right? So if people don't set boundaries, I will cross people's boundaries because I don't even know they exist. Right? So it's definitely one of the things. But however, if the person set the boundary in my zone, meaning governing what I say, then clearly I'm going to disrespect the person's boundary. So Rika, you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to throw in a scenario and just quite curious to hear what people think about it. Because the thing is with boundaries are invisible, right? And I know and it's about rules and who imposes the rules. There's the individuals who impose the rules, but there's also society and culture that imposes the rules, which is a lot of the things that you spoke about in terms of Asian culture. So there was this situation during COVID, right? There's so many like unspoken rules about boundaries and social distancing and everything. So what happened was like I was on the bus, and then there was this lady who kind of like slipped. And I was like, my natural reaction was to go and like help her. But at the same time, I was like, wait, should I help her? Like, am I crossing her boundary? Am I crossing society's boundaries? It was just weird. Like it was a weird feeling. I ended up not doing anything. And she was okay. And someone like her husband or someone next to her helped her. But I was just like, I don't know, am I crossing a boundary here? Like, do I help? Do I not help? So I'm just curious. I don't know what the right answer was or the right response is. I just want to like put that scenario to the group and see what you guys would have done.
I would love to hear Alex's answer.
I thought that was interesting. One is, I think, unless someone articulate that, I'm just going to talk about the boundaries between two people rather than societal norms, because, if you're going to try to meet everybody's expectations, then you go crazy. But let's say between you and the lady who fell, one way is to clarify what the boundaries were, because in this time it's actually quite sensitive, right? So I might go like, is it okay if I help you? Before you approach the person, because the person might be a bit phobic, it's like, don't get near me unless, due to COVID. But I think if we were respectful and we approach people respectfully, and then we clarify what those boundaries are, so that we can relate to one another better. And I think that's kind of how I approach it with that situation. And with people in general, right? Because, boundaries and norms could vary from culture to culture. So some of the boundaries could be like, if you were French, right? Pecking someone on the cheek as a greeting would be normal, right? If you were Asian, pecking someone on the cheek that you met for the first time might earn you a slap. So clarifying those boundaries and kind of knowing what the norms are and asking people if it's okay. So if you see a French person, you might go like, oh, is this okay for us to do this before you do it? So it might be awkward at first, but once you clarify those norms, then you start to establish kind of how do we relate to one another in a more personal level. So I don't think we can blanket and say how it is for society as a norm, but I think we can always come to clarify what's the boundary between two people.
I saw Jenny also did unmute, so I'm quite curious what you have to say about it.
Well, I had a couple thoughts on it. That I was originally thinking about it from my individualization, my number one. Since I'm high individualization, I try to get to know the uniqueness of each person, right? And it can be a little confusing with the boundaries, right? Because if everybody has slightly different boundaries, which they do, then it's like a lot of a mental burden for me to try to remember everybody's boundaries or respect everybody's boundaries. And then I had another thought, but it might be a little controversial. Controversial on here or not.
Yes, go ahead.
So I don't know if you guys are following that Jeffrey Epstein nastiness.
Okay, I'm not. But
that's what made me think of it. So the respecting of the boundaries. So when you're dealing with young people, especially young girls, I can't really speak to young boys, but to young girls, they often get into situations where they feel a little bit uncomfortable as they're growing up. And I think that sometimes predators can take advantage of these soft boundaries or these undefined boundaries. I don't know. We don't have to dig into that. It was just something that popped into my head.
No, it's a great topic actually. When we talk about this, I mean, even Asia, right? Like we have to give in to elders. We have to listen to what our parents say to us. We have to, like, these boundaries are like you don't own your own life, right? So we even have this saying in Chinese, right? When you die, your body belongs to your parents. Yeah, so it's all this different kind of stuff, right? So I mean, if your parents are not around, there's another bunch of question marks, but it's the kind of thing where it's like, it's for your ancestors. You have to preserve the body. So a lot of Chinese do not believe in donating the bodies for that reason, because you need to preserve it as is, that kind of thing. So that's also really interesting, right? So as we're talking about this, right, so I think we go back to the topic about the fact that, okay, if people don't set boundaries, what do we do, right? If people have strange boundaries, like I was dealing with somebody recently that was crossing my boundaries and I didn't set it first. So I was like just watching it as it happened. It was just on messaging. So I was like, okay, this person probably doesn't know. But as it went a little bit further, I had to draw the boundaries and the person got offended because I drew the boundaries. So it's also really interesting, right? So it's interesting how different people deal with boundaries and how comfortable and how much do we actually need to set our own boundaries? How much do we need to mind other people's boundaries? Like you said, right? If I'm going to remember every other person's boundaries, am I going to be able to keep track of it? And I think that's where I really want to hear Jason's thoughts on this, because he's been quiet this whole time. He's been nodding. He's been doing all kinds of reactions, but I don't hear a word from him. So I want to hear from him.
You're still muted. Jason.
Spacebar wasn't working. So I'm high deliberative. That's not fair to put me on the spot like that.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I think that from the standpoint of like, this is a tough one. So Jenny, what I was mulling over was your reference to the Epstein case, and there's part of me like it was are we? And I don't think you were doing this, but it was, are you blaming the victims, which I don't think you were. No, I don't think you were.
No.
And but that's what I was processing through. And I'm like, okay, how does that work? I do see that, I don't know that I would see the predators taking advantage of it as much as, and I wonder about, geez, you're killing me here. I don't know. I don't have a clear,
let me jump in. Jason, let me jump in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So no, so I was thinking about from a boundary perspective, absolutely not blaming the victims,
Right.
but the
I know.
fact that these young girls are still defining their own boundaries. And if there's someone, you know, like in a power position, a parent, an adult, you know, a respected elder, is it up to, I'm a teacher, right? I teach. That's my job. Is it my job to help teach young people boundaries and make sure that they're comfortable with them?
I think that's it's interesting because I would say I think we're all responsible for teaching people to learn to set their boundaries. You know, we've had the question. Yeah, it's a respect piece. I think that I want to know your boundaries so that I can interact with you appropriately. I come from the standpoint of, you know, you have the golden rule. What's the golden rule? Treat others
as you would have them do unto you. Yeah. And
yes. But you know the platinum rule.
Do unto others as they want done to them.
Yes. And so I subscribe to that. And so it's you can't treat them the way that you want to treat, or that they want to be treated, unless you're having that conversation and dialoguing about that. And so I find that very valuable. And I also think that in today's society, at least in the US, I culturally, I can't speak to other societies. You know, I feel like there has been a fair amount of parental leniency in helping to establish boundaries. And so it has fallen on educators and others to step in and help raise children more than parents have in the past. That's my own personal opinion. I don't have scientific backing for that, but I think that there is also, because of that, as part of that, I think that we all have a responsibility in recognizing people's boundaries and helping them establish them.
And Jason, I think to your point, I'm not sure whether that's partial to Asian cultures. I think many times parents actually don't practice the enforcing of boundaries. In fact, they are the ones who cross the boundaries of their children, right? They're the one that causes the child not to learn boundaries because they feel like, hey, I'm your parent, right? There shouldn't be any boundaries between us. Show me your phone or something like that. So I guess the children learn from the parents about boundaries, right? And if parents don't come in to help children learn more about how do they say no, how do they, I mean, even like standing up to bullies is a form of boundaries, right? So how do we help our children to understand what boundaries are and how to draw them, right? Not just in terms of, oh, you need to be able to draw boundaries with other people outside of the family, but how do you draw boundaries with the parent? Because that is first and foremost the most pertinent relationship for the child, right? So when parents help their kids to learn about boundaries between the parent and the child, I think that's where it all starts. So I mean, Jeffers and Ethan can jump in, but that's what I think.
Jeffers.
Yeah, so I'm hearing I mean what you have all said, and I think one thing that I mean occurs to me is someone said that it was an imaginary line or sort of like an imaginary boundary which sort of is somehow, I mean, because it's imagined, you sometimes don't know whether you cross over the imaginary line until you either first check for permission whether it's okay with that person, so you know where the line is, or B is like what Ethan say, you step into it and then you somehow get feedback in which you realize, oh, I've crossed it. So those are a couple of things that I'm hearing, and I sort of echo more towards that, but maybe that's also my personal preference towards like checking with other people, because I think in a general, not only in any kind of relationship, even in a general work setting with your colleagues, right? Sometimes people just have different preferences in which they work or do things. And sometimes you might want to check in with them, is this a right approach that works well with you? And that's how we naturally sort of approach people as well. The other thing is, I don't know, there's a lot of people using things called like contracting, like even before they start working with one another, something like let's contract a bit to understand more about one another. And as you understand more about one another, then you realize, oh, actually, this is your preferred way of me approaching you. So it wouldn't be so awkward of me behind second guessing how to approach people, because my default would be just to do what feels right for me. And then the next thing, I don't know, I get feedback. And I think it's sort of like, in a sense, it's sort of like building a relationship, because you at first the relationship is like nothing, and as you build a relationship, you get a sense of at least people whom are closer to you, you know how to approach them. The other thing I want to speak more is more towards like what Rika mentioned in terms of like if like nowadays with the COVID-19 situations, a lot of these boundaries and people get a bit edgy when you are not sure whether you're even crossing. Was it a social norm that was set there because of the context? Like because of COVID, a lot of things that you naturally would do start to become very different. Like, should I social distance first before helping someone? And that's what you mentioned, right? And Alex was saying like, oh, maybe one way is to check for permission. And my personal view is like, if the stakes are high, right? Like, I really don't know if maybe next thing I might get fined by the ambassador because I went to help that person, and that's what I get as a result. So if the stakes are high, personally, I would check, right? And I think it's safer to check. If the stakes are not so high, I mean, just day-to-day tasks, I think it's just you're just in the cycle of getting feedback from people, or if it's your preference, you can just check with someone else. So that's just what occurs to me.
I realized as we're having this conversation, I'm also kind of amused, because I realized I should have raised my hands for crossing people's boundaries all the time. No, but I'm saying this with all the thing where what I do is I kind of pre-warn them, I cross it, and then I go, is this okay? But I do it through a lot of different measures and a lot of different manners, not just verbal, right? Because it would be looking at the person's expressions, all these kind of different things. Because I started learning, I think, so just as a background again, I have mild autism, so I had to learn all this technically, right? Everything I learned about body language, speech patterns, and everything came from technical learning, and then integrating into how I look at everybody every day. So I'm saying that as a backdrop, right? So I started learning how to do that because I realized that people are usually not even honest with themselves, let alone honest to you when they say that's their boundary. Because I'm just gonna put it this way, right? Have you heard a guy who goes on Tinder and says that he just wants to be friends and actually really not looking for anything, and then the next moment, it's like he says one thing, he does another. So I mean, I have friends who have experienced that. We've seen all these kind of things happen. When is the boundary real? When is the boundary not? That's also one of the major things that we have to ask, right? I mean, I love it when Jason said it, is in as respectfully ask, err to the side of, don't cross any boundaries. But here comes the other part of the equation, right? How do you build relationships that are close while still maintaining those boundaries? That is a very important question. So yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to pass the time a little bit to the rest who have been quiet after this as well to hear what you have to say. So I think one of the things that's important about boundaries is about your boundaries, right? It's about making your boundaries known. It's about drawing your boundaries as far as possible, and then respecting other people's boundary when you come across it. So I'm going to speak from the perspective of what it means for drawing boundaries. And I think sometimes boundaries are unclear simply because people don't enforce them, right? So to Ethan's and Jeffers' point, sometimes a person cross the boundary once, you don't say anything. Cross the boundary twice, you don't say anything, you're just tolerating it. Cross the boundary 3 times, 5 times you explode, boom, you should have never done this to me. And the person goes like, but I've been doing this like for the past 3 weeks and you didn't say anything. So I think firstly, it's important for ourselves to be able to draw boundaries and let people know when those boundaries are crossed. I think that's one main point. The other point about boundaries I thought was important was, and I kind of lost my boundary point. It was about drawing boundaries. Okay, I've lost my point. I'll come back to it later when it comes. So I thought it's important for us to be able to draw and enforce those boundaries and let people know
I would just want to bring something to attention, right? Because high individualization people have one big issue. Every single person is a different boundary.
Yes. Yes. So we're trying very hard and very naturally to understand what each person's boundary is, and we're trying very hard to respect it. Sometimes I get confused. I don't know if the rest of you who have individualization get confused too, but we try very hard to meet those boundaries. Okay, so I want to hear from
Jenny wanted to share about individualization. I think this will be.
Oh, Jenny, come.
Yeah. So do you think that since you and I both have high individualization, do we have different boundaries ourselves with different people? I think I do. And maybe it's my relator as well. There's different people, like I'm not a hugger, right? In the American culture, many women, they hug each other, right? As a greeting. And I'm not really a hugger, but there's a couple of people that I will let hug me.
Right.
And it's specific to individuals, right? I'm outside of my mom and my sisters, right?
Yep.
But like friends, I'm not. So I feel like my boundaries change a little bit depending on who I'm interacting with. Then that's confusing, right?
No, I think that's normal. Okay, I don't know if it's confusing other people because I have individualization, but I mean, I think boundaries are also very context dependent.
Which is why we should open it to the floor. We should open it to the floor. Everybody with their response. I agree with you, Alex. Right? So, but let's have other people answer this.
Okay, I'm gonna ask Xingming. What do you think of this?
Think of boundaries.
Yeah, so is it confusing? Do you have different boundaries with different people, or is it like same throughout? How does it work for you?
Definitely for different people. I mean, that's what make us humans, right? We are complex, we are different, and through communication, we can understand people's boundary more. So actually, I like the part on clarifying boundaries. Yeah. So there's something that I think is a takeaway for me, because sometimes unknowingly I'll cross other people's boundaries as well. I think just want to touch on Rika's story. She mentioned about helping a person in the public. I think by showing empathy, showing that you care for people, I don't think, even if you were to violate it, I don't think I don't think people will get mad at you. Yeah, at least, hey, you try to help, but end up the person doesn't want your help. I think it's fine. But I think at a certain situation, if I were to be the one falling down, of course, I hope for someone to pick me up also, checking in with me, whether I'm okay or not. Yeah, so clarifying boundaries and checking, because everybody has different boundaries, and through communication, I think this is where we understand each other better. Yeah.
I'm loving what's happening in the chat group, but I think we can come to that in a moment. So a scenario came to my head, right? I'd just like to share it and see what you all think about this scenario in terms of boundaries and in terms of helping people. So I was at the MRT, so it's our mass rapid transport, the train, station one, not the station, but in the train itself one day. And I saw this gentleman. He approached another gentleman that was seated in the reserve seat. You know, in the trains, there's this reserve seat that says, please give this seat up for the elderly, for the so and so forth, right? So this gentleman saw that there was an elderly standing near him. He approached the gentleman seated in that reserve seat and said he should give up the seat for the elderly. Right? So the guy went like, no, yes, I'm a paying customer. I just want to sit here. Eventually, as he was bugging, the elderly woman saw him doing it and said, no, it's okay, leave him, I don't need the seat. But he continued to pursue the case until the person left. The person got so frustrated, he stood up from his seat, he walked to the next station, and the old lady was so embarrassed. He looked at the young man, he said, I think, I know you're trying to be kind and trying to do a good thing. It was unnecessary. And she walked out to the other carriage as well. She was pissed off, right? and probably felt a bit invalidated. It's like, oh no, I may be old, but that doesn't mean that people need to be offended to give up their seats for me. So I guess in terms of boundaries, there's several things happening at the same time, right? There's the societal norm, someone should give the seat for the old lady. There was the guy trying to be a nice guy to get the seat for the old lady. There was the old lady which was like, don't do anything. I don't want to inconvenience anyone. You're embarrassing me by doing this. So I think there are a lot of boundary transpassed in this situation. So what do y'all think about all this? Okay, so to give you the context, after the guy walked off, the old lady got mad and walked off. He went to his kid. The kid looked like, I don't know, anything between 5 and 10 years old, and started to explain to him that, hey, it didn't go very well, but that's no reason for us to not give up seats to elderly in future. So it was like parenting, teaching, norms of how to behave to elderly. I thought he had it in spades. In terms of boundaries, what do you all think? What do you all think of the entire situation? Some of you might have seen it before. I saw it. I was like, I kudos to the dad for trying to teach the kid. It did feel very uncomfortable for the old lady, right? And for the person who was asked to give up the seat, who refused to at first, until he was bugged so much that he stood up and walked off.
Let me organize this in terms of boundaries and where the boundaries transgressed, right? Like, so that we kind of know. So social boundary.
Wait there. Why don't we hear from the rest first?
Yeah. No. Is it like just so that because you see everybody hesitating to respond right now off the bat. I just start with. I just help package it just a little bit more so they know what they're going to comment on. So where do you think the person crossed the boundaries? What boundaries were crossed? Right? What were the things that were happening over there that you would like to clarify or even develop an understanding over? Because I think each of us look at different boundaries as we're looking at the situation. So what do you think was a boundary that was crossed? That was not crossed? That was actually being respected? What were the things that were happening over there?
Let's ask someone whose video isn't on. Leah, are you still with us? What do you think of situations and what do you think were some boundaries that were crossed?
Okay, first of all, if someone's sitting in that seat, there's a lot of assumptions that's going on. I would say, the keyword is assumptions. Like, if you're young, you're seated there, you don't deserve to sit there. Like, you can have the ability to give the seat, but the person may have an invisible disability, or he may be very, very tired after like a long day. Mm-hmm. And some people just assume on his behalf that you have the ability to give up the seat to an elderly. And I think that is what I thought this was the violation.
That's definitely one. How about the rest? Let's go to Ling Jie. And Ling Jie, you're muted, so you need to unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. How I see this, right? Your question is.
Yeah. What were the boundaries? What were the violations?
But my question is, if their seat was designated to the elderly, is there a signal that is tagged to their seat? If their seat is designated to the elderly or to the people in need, I guess the issues about boundaries is a bit complicated. If it's the normal seat, then I guess both party the men may have a blur or ambiguous view or perspective about boundaries. Yeah.
Okay. So Ling, your view is that because there's a sign, so it was the one with the sign overhead that says, please give up your seat to the elderly and those who are pregnant and so forth.
Yeah. That sign always give me very clear signal. So whenever I saw that sign, I will not take that seat. I mean, as a person, and I have the same feeling when I saw some young people sit at that needy seat. I always call that needy seat. If I saw young people sitting there, I have the tendency to ask them to stand up also. Yeah, but I didn't do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Get you. Thanks for sharing. Yes,
I think gets
Lindsay, I'm
complicated.
going to mute you while you're not speaking because there's some echo.
Okay.
Is it okay now?
Okay,
Yeah,
Rita.
I think it gets more complicated the more people are involved, right? So I think through the scenario that I gave, it was just between me and that person. But here you have three people, three different boundaries that kind of like overlap each other. And when it becomes that kind of situation, you need to, it's not black and white, and you need to kind of read the room and understand the dynamics that are happening. So I think the intentions were probably right. The guy really wanted to help, make a good point, but at the end of the day, no one won. The guy was embarrassed. The woman could have sat there, but then she felt embarrassed. And then maybe, I don't know, maybe he embarrassed himself when he was talking to the kid. So, I mean, to the point that was made earlier, that your intention was right. They might not have like agreed with it, but if you keep pushing and pushing, I think that's when the violation happened, because you can have the best of intentions, but that's what feedback is for. But if you still are so stubborn, that's not being empathetic then, right? So I think that's it, what the boundary wasn't crossed the first time, it was probably crossed the second or the third time after.
Yeah. And I think empathy, right? So giving help where help isn't desired is actually a form of boundary crossing.
Yeah. So I like what Rika mentioned. So I just want to speak to a point whether it's like whose boundaries actually get violated, right? Is it the person who expects the person who sit up for, because he cares and he wants to help the old lady, but is he even aware or conscious that actually it was his own boundaries that is violated because he expects that from others? Even he meant his intention was to help the old lady gets the seat, right? So yeah, so I think that's sort of like came up, like is more in terms of like whether he's even aware that what's happening.
So let me just resonate with you on that point, on the point that like he did a social justice behavior by telling the person to get off the seat, but by doing so, by feeling justified in doing that action, he started violating the person's own boundaries.
Yeah.
In fact, he violated two people's boundaries, right? He violated the person sitting down. He violated the old lady who didn't want help because he was it was almost a form of triangulation, right?
Yeah.
I didn't want you to be my savior, but it's like, oh, savior complex, come, let me save you and give you a seat.
Yeah, and I remember the other point about what Rika was saying also, like, is that we are quite responsive beings, right? And we naturally, if we are aware and like we read the room, naturally we can see that it's not working out well, and we sort of can adapt and adjust to it. But if we are sort of blinded by our own boundaries, I think that's where we can't see and read what's happening around the room. Right. So I think that's my other point. Yeah.
And there's a point that I wanted to get to was that oftentimes when we draw boundaries, it almost becomes a means to control the other person. It's like, this is my boundaries, do this. This is my boundary, you need to do that for me, right? So and for a good period of time, I had that same misconception, I'll call it. And then my thoughts changed, right? Boundaries isn't about getting people to do what you want to do, but boundaries is how do you control yourself and enforce that boundary if someone crosses it. So you, for example, if someone insists on, okay, I don't have a scenario right now, but if someone physically gets onto your turf, your property, right? You then firstly need to make sure that there's a fence, there's a boundary line. You need to tell people where it is. If people insist on crossing it, then you enforce it by calling the police or something, or let the dogs out. So it's not about controlling people to make them do what you want. It's about having the freedom to do what you need to do to enforce your boundaries.
So actually, in the same sense, there would boundary be specifically focused on the concept of defense rather than offense, right? I'm gonna link here, right? So as the concept of boundaries, right? Boundaries is meant to be a defense, right?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That's good.
Jason, thank you for being here. It was great having you. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Awesome.
All right.
So I have an example of a benevolent boundary crossing. If you guys are hearing it. from me.
I love that term.
Okay, well, I stole that. I just listened to the Lean In, the book by Sheryl Sandberg, Lean In. I just listened to it twice in the last week. So I had a lot of things I was carrying. I had like 2 bags, and leaving the university where I work. And there's 4 stairs that I have to walk up before I can walk out to the parking lot. And so my hands were very full with a lot of stuff. And just as I'm getting ready to walk out the door, the dean of the college is right behind me. And he offered to help like 3 times. And I really didn't need his help. I didn't really want his help. I do this all the time. But he got offended that I didn't have him help me. It's a very weird dynamic because he's the dean, right? He's the big boss. And I'm not even like a tenure track faculty. I'm just a lowly instructor. And it made tension between us. So in that case, do I relinquish my boundary and have this person of power help me, or do I just do my thing that I always do?
Okay, why don't we
make
let
sense or no?
someone? Yeah, it does. I have a couple of questions and a couple of thoughts.
I have a ton of thoughts about this, but let's have somebody else talk about it.
How about Winston? You've been quiet for a while now. What do you think about this situation?
I think you should still maintain that boundary. If it was me, it's my personal opinion. Yeah, because this may seem to be a benevolent boundary, but I mean, if you let your boundary be crossed, then sometimes not so benevolent things might also cross your boundary. Yeah.
That was my thinking of it.
Okay, so this is actually something we're going to talk about in the next session on responsibility. But I'm going to ask you a question, Jenny. Do you feel responsible for how he feels about you enforcing a boundary?
I do. And I feel bad about it, and it made me angry. It made me angry that he wouldn't respect my first, no, thank you, I've got it. And I was very cheerful and direct. I'm a direct person. But he literally asked me 3 or 4 times. And it's like, it's okay, I've got this, right? No problem. I'm happy I do this all the time. And he just kept pushing. So, and there had been a little tension between us before.
Okay.
Because he's yeah, there's tension before.
I see.
Rika, you have thoughts?
My thoughts is I have to run.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Okay. See ya.
Sorry. It was nice to meet everyone, and I hope to know what the resolution of this is, and when I connect with Alex after. Bye, everyone.
This is live on Facebook, so the videos are all there. And
awesome.
So we'll catch up again.
Okay.
And all
right. Bye.
See you.
I think to explore this a little bit further is it's an interesting thing, right? Because you put this in the same picture as Epstein, right? Epstein's case, and benevolent boundary violation can lead to I'll chime in on Winston's side of what he was talking about. I mean, of course, not all will lead there, and majority will not, right? I don't think it was meant to lead there, but it also goes back to the same thing, right? Like, what is the cultural norm? How is it being abused? What is going on, right? I think that's where the interesting thing lies. I just wanted to highlight that.
Well, and the cultural norm thing is actually part of the problem. He's not an American. He didn't grow up here. He didn't go to school here. So I think that may have been contributing to the pressure, right? And then here I am, this quite independent, quite self-sufficient vocal female. And I think he didn't he didn't understand that. I don't know. I think that was part of the tension.
Yeah. So I don't take rejection well too. So when I try to help people, and it took me a while to learn that not everybody wants my help. So I'm one of those that, some people say have savior complex. I'm learning from it. I call myself a recovering savior complex, whatever. So I also realized that a lot of times it's my problem because I feel offended by someone else's boundaries when I'm trying to help them. I go like, but can't you see if you just listen to me, just let me help you, it'd be so much easier for you. It's like, what's wrong with you? Right? And then why are you rejecting me? And sometimes it almost feels as if that rejection becomes a bit personal when it's not. So it's not personal, but it can feel personal. And that's actually one of the issues that we need to grapple with on our own, who have those complex. So I learned over the years that, okay, look, not everybody wants help. You can offer it once, offer it twice. Don't force it on a person. But if the person says no, then okay, just walk off and say, well, it's still on the table. If you want, you come back and let me know, and leave it there. So that's kind of something I've learned to do along the way. But I totally recognize the feeling of rejection when you offer help when someone says no. But all it really is that person enforcing boundaries like what you did. So the question then is, whose problem is it that the person feels bad, feels rejected? So in my case, I've learned that it's not the other person's problem for rejecting me. The person is just saying, no, I don't need help. What's wrong with that? Then the problem lies with me, because now I have to go back and think about, why do I feel rejected when a person says no to me? Is there a self-image, self-concept? Is there a belief that I have that causes me, like, if someone says no to me for trying to help them, it means that I'm less valuable or something like that. So, all these complex equivalences in our head just occurs really, really quickly. And that problem is solely in my court. So when we talk about boundaries, it's about where you begin, where you end, and where someone else begins, right? So that feeling of rejection is my responsibility, not the person who said no. I need to deal with it. So in your case, the responsibility of dealing with the feelings of rejection rests solely in the courts of your deed, not you. And if you start to take on that responsibility, that's when your resentment comes in, right? You start to feel like, why do I have to be responsible? Why does he feel that way when I say no, and all I'm trying to do is just enforce my boundaries? So that's why I asked you, do you feel responsible for his feelings? And should you feel responsible for his feelings?
I don't feel responsible, but it did make me angry that he didn't respect my boundary. Yeah, see, and I'm looking at your list. I think your empathy is contributes to your savior complex.
Yes, it does.
Empathy is in the bottom 10 for me. So I didn't feel responsible for his feelings. It made me angry, probably because empathy is low for me.
But okay, so what exactly was it that made you angry? That he crossed it, or that he was upset about it?
That he was upset about it. It was like he was all like offended. His body language and his face, he was very offended that I didn't let him help me. It was going to slow me down. To let him help me was going to slow me down. And I hate being slowed down. I've already got everything stacked perfectly. I know how to do it. I do this every day.
So my question then is, what made you angry at his offense? At him feeling offended? So I mean, just leave him be. If you're angry, so be it. Be offended. And you walk off and do your thing.
Maybe because he didn't think I could handle it myself.
So let me. So Alex, wonderful use of the concept of responsibility. We were definitely having this conversation next week. But I just wanted to say, like, no, it's that that you are looking at the possible consequences of a deteriorating relationship with him, if of this scenario.
And there's high stakes.
Yes. And so therefore you felt responsible for the interaction, which would lead you to having more issues in the future. which is why you felt angry. I think it was more like an unfairness anger. It's like it's your issue, not mine. Why is this affecting us now?
Yeah, yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah, I think that's why the anger. So I think it's very interesting, right? So it's interesting when people offend other people's boundaries and get offended when people establish boundaries. It seems like and it's a cultural norm. It's a cultural norm, right? It's a cultural norm, whether it's in Asia, whether it's in the US, whether it's it like a lot of different cultures where when a person says no, it means no. It's okay, leave it there, right? But then what do most people do, including like me last time, right? Like younger me also just poke right straight through. I came from a culture, like my family culture is right straight in. I don't care, you say no, I'm still gonna push through. And that's no boundaries, right? So I came from that. So it then goes into other people's territory and their boundaries and hurts them. And if we get offended by them getting hurt, it's like we went on the offensive and we got offended.
Right.
Does it make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, he's from India.
That makes perfect sense now.
Okay, does that make sense?
My friends will go like, yeah, that makes sense. It's a very Asian culture thing.
Okay. And there's definitely ego involved.
Oh yeah.
I think I don't even know whether I can say this live. Okay, so there are cultural norms for different countries, and in some countries, when they are at certain position, they see themselves as superior. And then there are certain norms in terms of behavior that they expect from other people because of it. Does it make sense?
So there's this bunch of stuff, right, where you have to respect my crossing of your boundaries in order for me to feel like I'm authority.
Yeah, that doesn't work for me.
I know, but it's cultural norm, right? Over here, I literally hear bosses crossing boundaries of their employees all the time. Like it doesn't matter what country, as long as it's Asian. It seems very normal for the boss to cross the boundaries of the employees, especially personal time, especially tasks, micromanaging, that kind of feeling. It is very normal here. And I think that's also one of the reasons why we talk so much about boundaries today.
Well, and the fact that he's leading an American organization, right? It does create tension and not just with me, with others as well. And it's kind of like, yeah.
I think that's where culturalization is required, right? Like cultural training into the space.
Jenny, I think you need to coach him. Put on your strengths coaching hat and go like, hey.
Should I try to coach the dean? Yeah, I don't think that's...
Career limiting.
You never know. For all you know, he might take it up.
I have to work on it for a while before that happens.
I think that as coaches and as strength coaches, sometimes it's useful to help people see certain things about themselves they may not be aware. And one of the things, so we may not have permission, so we need to do this very, very carefully. At the same time, I also realize that oftentimes leaders don't get real, honest feedback from people around them.
Correct.
Right? So their ability to become self-aware gets highly limited because no one dares tell them these things, right? So, but then there's also the fear that if you do tell them, you might step on their toes and then it limits your career. So it's a really fine line, probably more in Ethan's turf to talk about since he talks about office politics and whatnot. But personally for me, I think that when I had a new boss, I did, some norming with him, I call it. So we went on a trip together, and when we were at airport waiting, so we were in India, and waiting for the plane waiting to get on the plane was like a long time away. So we sat down, we had coffee, we were chatting. And we started setting norms with each other, like, how do we communicate with one another? What do you expect? This happened the previous time. What were you thinking? Right? So is this how you like people to relate with you? This happened, I felt this way. So it was vulnerable, but it helped set the grounds for us in terms of how we related to one another, and that helped the relationship to improve and got better. So
I think that
really
comes with the concept of opportunity as well, right? Like, because you had an opportunity of norming with him in that trip, whereas she had all of 10 seconds.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely
30, yeah.
But I mean, yeah, if there was an opportunity to do the norming, I think that would be very, very useful in establishing better working relationships with, whether it be peers or bosses.
Yeah.
I think, okay, so let's explore this a bit more. I think I love this concept of the boundaries and where boundaries lie, right? I think, and because I brought up the topic of responsibility, but we're going to talk about it next week, but I just want to talk about like the concept of boundaries being clear. Okay, how clear do we have to set our boundaries, or is it only when it's transgressed do we have to be clear about it? That's a very powerful question, because do we scream out our boundaries before we talk to people? It's like, have you seen those movies about the first date and the crazy lady who comes and I do not eat shellfish, I do not do this, I do not go out for salsa, I do not this, I do not that, right? Okay, that's a next level of boundary list.
Right from the get-go, right? Imagine the first time you meet someone, you get that list.
So it's made fun of in television. It's also something that scares most people away, because you're like, okay, you're just telling me a whole bunch of no's. Like, what? Right? So that's also one extreme end of boundary setting. And then there's the other end of boundary setting is not boundary setting. So what is a healthy middle? Right? I think this is why the discussion, I think, is very useful today, because where do you think the middle is? Where?
I think it depends a lot on what type of boundaries. I think, so engineer here talking, right? Engineer trained. I think different boundaries have different levels of criticality. Some boundaries are more important than others, right? So I think if you get the most important boundaries for that specific context communicated, then I think that's enough. And then as and when someone comes along and gets near to certain boundaries that you don't like, then having the ability to articulate those boundaries, which I think a lot of us don't, right? We just tolerate it, hoping that somehow it will not happen again. And that never ever works, right? So if we are able to articulate it, I think that's when
somebody just sent me a photo of the best book possible to talk about this. It's called The Courage to be Disliked.
The Courage
Boundary settings. Right? Especially for Asian cultures. I just wanted to sound it out, because when you say no to people for some reason, people don't like it. And so the courage to be disliked, right? When you set the boundaries. So I agree with you. Criticality, right? So some of the critical boundaries have to be set. What is lax? And then that kind of things. So it has to be individualized, but in communication, right? For different relationship levels. Oh yeah, the person has to be, Jenny, great concept, right? You need to advocate for yourself, right? You need to speak up for yourself. You need to stand up for yourself. So that's where, when is it advocating for yourself? When is it transgressing into the other world where you're even telling people you're not allowed to use the word he, she, or, that's going into other people's boundaries? So yeah. I don't know. Like it's where, are you advocating for yourself, or are you advocating for other people to be like you?
Yeah, so we come back to boundaries as something that you do for yourself and not to control other people. So we can't go and say like, hey, look, my boundaries is you can't use foul language in front of me. Right? So I mean, what you're going to do, you're going to take the mouth of that person. You're going to take a cane and chase after the person if the person uses foul language in front of you. What are you going to do? I mean, so a boundary then means something like, look, I'm not going to talk to you until you can talk without using vulgarities. So you walk away and say, when you're ready to talk, let me know. I'm open to talk to you if you stop using vulgarities.
Right.
So that becomes a boundary line, right? You walk away from it, or you do something from it, but you can't force the person to not do it, because that person has their own freedom of choice. They can choose to do it. They can choose to cross your boundary. You can't control them. But what you can do is control your behavior if someone does cross that boundary. So I think that was kind of what I was trying to articulate earlier, right? That the defense versus the offense, you can't control people with boundaries. You can only control yourself.
Right. The idea of walking away, I love, right? It's like, yeah, yes, I will have dinner with you, but not if you're going to bring up this conversation. And then, okay, I won't. And then you still bring up the conversation, then I'm going to walk away.
So the person knows that that's a boundary. And if the person still wants to have dinner from you, then they know that, hey, if I want to have dinner with Jen, I need to not talk about this.
Right. And if you bring it up, I'm going to walk away.
Yep. And that's your boundary, your enforcement of that boundary.
Because we've made that very clear that that's off limits for dinner.
Yep.
Thoughts from other people? Anyone else? Jeffers?
I'm just absorbing what you all say. I think, I think I like what you say about it's really not to control other people. It's more for advocating for yourself. I think that was an aha moment for me because I never thought about it that way. Yes, and I had something going. So I had another question related to that. So, which is, does the boundaries get loosened when your relationship is strong with others? Or does the boundaries get loosened when you had a great mood, just happened you had a great mood? And let's say that event that happened to Jenny at a moment that boss the dean had a raise, right? So everything seems like a good mood. So maybe whatever that happened didn't seem to bother him at that point in time because he had a great mood. So I just want to hear your views. Does it have any kind of influence around it?
Great thought. Yeah, Jenny, any of your thoughts? Because you're the protagonist here.
I think that the mood of both sides absolutely can have an impact. He may have had, a rough day, and maybe somebody in his office said, I'm not getting enough help from you. Right? I mean, who knows what kind of conversation it's been, there's been a lot of hard things that he's been trying to work through. And so maybe he had, I need to be more helpful on his mind when he's walking out the door. And then he runs into me. He takes it the other way. So yeah.
Jenny, there's empathy at work there. It's not your bottom.
Just because it's in my bottom 10 doesn't mean I can't do it.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Jeff, I think you raised the point, right? That, if our boundaries, I think it's perfectly fine for boundaries to be dependent on context and people. But I think if we are having boundaries that are inconsistent with the same context and the same people, that confuses people. Like sometimes, like for example, Jenny, if in your situation, if sometimes it's okay for that person to talk about that topic, that taboo topic, and sometimes it's not. Like, I'm in a good mood, okay, let him talk about it. Right? And other times you don't, then that actually sends mixed signals and it becomes very confusing for people as to where those boundaries are. So boundaries need to be consistent and not be dependent on the mood and how you're feeling at the point of time. And I think parents do that a lot as well.
Can I tell you that I'm not in a good mood today and therefore don't talk to me?
You can.
You can tell, yes, you can. Please leave me alone. Please don't talk to me. I need to concentrate. That is.
So does it have to be consistent or does it have to be consistently communicated?
Communicated.
Consistent communication versus consistent boundaries.
I think it depends on the context. So, okay, so for example, if one of the boundaries or the rules that you had was about curfew for your children, about what time they need to come back. and sometimes you were okay with them breaking curfew and sometimes you're not, then that's confusing, right? Then the person will start to learn to test or say, oh, mom's in a good mood today, I think I can come back late. I was like, oh, go, let's make mom happy, send her a nice, text message and say, and then break curfew.
That's communicated boundaries. When you broke the boundary, when you broke the curfew, I noticed that you were out doing this. So I am okay with it if you broke curfew because of this. Now that's a new rule to the boundary that was set versus inconsistently communicated. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's
Jen.
So there's a topic that my husband likes to discuss. This one at dinner, and my 17-year-old son and I really don't want him to talk about it because he's being very one-sided about it, and we disagree with him. And so he got very mad, and he said, that he felt like he couldn't say anything. I can't say anything, I get yelled at. And so we dug into it a little bit, and it was this one specific topic. And I said, listen, I think we need a new rule. If you want Frankie and I to have dinner with you, then you can't bring this up because we disagree with you so strongly. If you bring this up, then we're not going to sit and have dinner with you. Because I said, and we want to have dinner as a family. So there's plenty of other things for us to talk about. So now we can talk about it other places, and I still have the opportunity to walk away if I don't want to hear it. But it actually helped him to calm down a little bit, and so he started to see my perspective and my son's perspective. But we don't talk about it at dinner because everybody's too hungry and they're too cranky to try to maneuver through all that at dinner. I don't know. Is it consistently communicated? And we had to struggle through it a little bit before we made this rule, right? And then when he brought it up, we said, listen, that's off limits at dinner. And then if he shuts up, then everybody's fine and they just keep going and nobody he doesn't get punished for bringing it up.
Did he agree to that boundary, or was that mutually agreed?
I mean, they'll just walk away, right?
Well, he mostly agreed to it because we've always tried to have dinner as a family, and it's important to have dinner, as a family. But this topic he kept bringing up, it was just making Frankie and I so angry and so upset. So yeah, I would say he agreed to it. But he still tries to push. So that's where it's up to us to change the subject, right? Or to remind him that's off limits. It's best if we can change the subject and not get his defenses up.
Thoughts on this, the rest of you? How about Jingming? So I'm just calling people who have not heard from for a while. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's there must be a reason something is making you guys mad, right, Jenny? Yeah. So I guess it's I'm sure you have communicated to your son, right?
It's the husband.
The husband. Yeah. I mean, you have communicated to the husband. So I think end of the day, there should be a mutual open-mindedness, which means like not only you should be open-minded, I think the other party should also resonate that as well, so that in terms of conversation, I think because a lot of times I just feel that if I were to get angry about something, I expect something. That's why if it doesn't happen, that makes me angry or upset.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, if I'm able to manage the expectation or even to communicate, is let's see how we can talk about this in a better way. I think it could be one of a suggestion. Yeah, instead of communicating in that way, try other forms, maybe rephrase certain things, and I don't know. That's the beauty of communication.
You're very insightful. Yes, you're very insightful. And we had been kind of talking about this topic off and on. And this is how I would phrase it. I would say my husband was coming in hot at dinner. It's like he was coming in hot and he was making all these proclamations and all this, one-sided. He didn't want to hear. He didn't want to hear our perspective. He just kept disagreeing with us, just flatly disagreeing with everything. And that's why we couldn't do it at dinner, because we couldn't come around. So what I did, and so like I said, you're very insightful. After I found out why he was so upset with me, I actually did some reading on the topic to try to come up with some facts, some science, some facts to help me explain my position. And so that I could, and then he could understand my position a little bit rather than telling me I was wrong. So yes, so I instead of me getting so defensive, I took a step back and tried to communicate to him. But it's too hot of a topic for us to discuss at dinner.
I think it's very. I think I love it. It's so specific. Right, the boundary is specific.
It is. It's one topic.
And it's only at dinner.
I'm curious, were there any occasion where you allow him to talk about that topic?
Yes.
So
yes. We were sitting and having coffee on the patio, and we talked to him after I did my reading. And I said, I gave him an example, a specific thing. He goes, "Oh, what does that mean?" And then so then I explained it to him. And when he was calm and I was calm, and we had already had breakfast, everybody was little bit better to be receptive to the other person's opinion.
So Jenny, a question that I have is about where we draw the boundary. So the boundary could be that the topic is off limits, or the boundary could be about the way that you disagree with one another.
Yes, you are. Yes.
So there are different ways of looking at it. One, because what I'm hearing is that your husband is probably feeling very frustrated. There are a lot of things that he wants to say and talk to other people, but he doesn't have the opportunity to do that, and therefore it keeps coming back. So maybe just a suggestion, maybe one of the ways that you can redraw the boundary is about, okay, how do we communicate with one another when we disagree strongly, or when we have very strong opposing opinions about a topic?
Did we agree to cross this boundary to tell Jenny what to do with her life?
Yes, we did. That's why I say it's a suggestion. You can choose to do it, or you can choose not to do it. It's a suggestion.
Well, and you guys probably think I'm this like wild, independent, mouthy female, but I'm really not. It's just this one particular topic that he's very wound up. He watches the media all day and then he gets very wound up. But you're right, and mostly we do communicate well, right? We've been married 26 years, so we've got nobody's perfect, right? But
on a personal note, like that's why I'd rather like explore this properly, because I like for Jenny to bring this up, it definitely is something that affects her quite a bit. And looking at how you deal with boundaries, and again, married for 26 years, so I think the other part about this is I just recognizing quite interestingly that we kind of just went into a boundary that Jenny thankfully did not state as a boundary. If you notice that, we started telling her how she,
how she
so for
should
me-
do or how she should feel, right? Yeah.
So the key part here is that, right, so I actually wrote an article about this, and that's why I'm so into this. Performance versus connection, right? I don't even understand her situation. What I did was I resonated with you and was looking for opinions. And then before I know it, and I was like, here's a suggestion for what you could do better. I mean, I know, Alex, benevolent, boundary violator. There was no permission asked. There was no specific area that was like, let's just note this lack of boundary for that moment.
Guilty as charged.
Jenny allowed us because she can advocate for herself. Am I right, Jenny?
I can advocate for myself in this setting.
Yes.
In this setting, because it's strengths, it's, we're here to coach each other, we're here to help each other. That's sort of an assumption when you join one of these calls, right?
Yeah. So she but it is still a boundary crossed. I mean, I'm saying this in a beautiful way, just as a little note for us to just think about.
Well, and I'll tell you what, when you guys did try to coach me a little bit, I did get a little defensive. I don't know if you saw it.
Yes, I noticed it.
Yeah, because
yeah, no. That's not what you signed up for right now.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I had to add in a little bit of advocacy for the situation. But I'm also saying this. I'm also saying this is so that was actually, guys, we talked about boundaries today, and what just happened here. So again, because I'm also a technical reader about people's body language. So I mean, so I like just just want to say, I love talking to you, Jenny, because you're opinionated and you have great thoughts. Just want to let you know that, and that's why I was. So I wrote that in, and your immediate facial reaction was awkwardness. Sorry about that. I hope I didn't cross any boundaries with that. I was just saying I really like talking to you, right? But this is the same kind of thing, right? So it was just expression, so it didn't cross any boundaries versus straight in, right? So these are all the little boundaries that are really interesting. Watch as it happens. Boundaries are crossed all the time. Actually, it's whether we want to stand up and go, or it's okay, for this round, it's fine. For this round, it's fine. So that's why the interesting concept of consistency of boundaries is a really interesting concept. Because when do we allow something in a better mood, like what Jeffer said? And I think that's why this topic is so hard. When is it okay? When is it not okay? That's why I went back to the concept of communication, right?
Right.
And that's what Jenny was specific about at dinner, and only on this topic. And very specific. The rest of the boundaries are perfectly fine, right? I just need to add this new boundary because there's a problem with it. And I just wanted to highlight that as like a good way of kind of go, hey guys, here's a meta view of what we just did here, right? So
yeah, can I just say something? Ethan, thank you so much for saying that, because I felt the exact same thing when I had the urge to tell Jenny what to do. Then I was like, I don't think this is what she signed up for. And I was like, and then I asked myself, why was it? Why did I feel that urge? To, was it the helpfulness in me, or something else, right? So I find this so thank you so much. I think you really need to link to us the article. I would really love to read it and get a deeper insight into what you just shared.
Okay, yeah, I'll share with you. I'll share with you later on. Yeah. I talk about performance versus connection. So are we looking to understand the other person first before looking for performance? So whatever was happening here looked like you could have done better versus can I understand more about what you're experiencing?
Right, and there's no way you guys could understand the complexity of a 30-year relationship. There's no way in and out, right? And it's just, but that was an example of me using a boundary to keep the peace, because I want my son to have dinner with us, right? I could sit there and argue with my husband through the whole dinner, right? But my son, it upsets my son. So, and I want him to have dinner with us. So that's why we've made that rule before: no cell phones at the dinner table. And that boundary gets crossed all the time, but generally we try to do that because we don't eat dinner as a family every night. So when we do, we try to focus on each other and remind each other.
So Jenny, before we end the session for today, I was wondering if you could indulge my savior complex a little bit and let me share something
Sure,
that
go
I
ahead.
do. So yeah, Ethan's
No,
laughing.
Alex, no.
It's kind of fun thing. So I have a father who often has very strong opinions, and he doesn't listen to anything that I say once he has a fixed opinion, right? He's so like, this is what I communicate. It must be this. Even if he has gone around asking all my friends who agree with me, he will still be of the same opinion still. So I saw this little meme that was sent to me through WhatsApp one of these days, and I thought it was very interesting. I'm just going to share that on screen right now. So I saw this, right? What's the secret to eternal happiness? To not argue with fools. I disagree. Yes, you are right. So I started doing that with my dad, and he kept disagreeing with me. I just looked at him and said, yes, you are right. And he doesn't know how to respond to me anymore. And kind of like, no, but I want you to listen to me. Yes, you are right. I just repeated that a few times. The conversation ended pretty quickly. So it's just kind of a funny thing that came to my head while you were talking about it.
My favorite threat killer is you win.
Yeah. So just like little fun thing that I thought I could share.
Cool. I think it's about time to wrap up because it's already 9:39 on our side. I think we crossed the boundary, right?
Yeah, we did. Again.
No, but it's great. I think let me do a quick summary, or no, let's get the input learner intellection person. Is it okay if you do the summary?
Oh, me? No, you do. Never mind, you do it. Let me have some more input for this session.
Sure. Thank you for drawing the boundary. Okay, so today,
in action.
Oh my gosh. We're gonna walk away from today's session all looking at, hey, that guy's drawing a boundary. Oh, this boundary has crossed.
No, I think it's brilliant. I think being hyper aware of it is really useful. I think we started the conversation with, okay, when are we crossing people's boundaries? When is it that it is our only issue that people don't accept us crossing the boundaries, right? Because whether it's a cultural norm or what, and this is interesting, right? We started the whole thing with Rika talking about how boundaries define us geographically, culturally, individually. And I think this is really interesting, right? So the boundaries that we have sets a lot of what we can control or what we feel like we want to control. And I love this topic because literally this topic is going to go into part of my curriculum soon. So thank you guys. Like, you helped me explore this really well, and I look forward to sharing with you guys what I've learned from this overall thing, because I will link this to neurology and everything else. Interestingly, what is really interesting that we've gotten to was boundaries are very unclear, right? Most people don't know if they're crossing a boundary, and the only way we can know is if the other person reacts. Now, there are subtle hints of awkwardness, defensiveness, and discomfort, but again, it can be abused because a little bit of discomfort might not mean no, which then grows to the Epstein kind of story, right? So that is where it goes over the top. Our favorite new term today is called benevolent boundary violator, right? There's a new wonderful term that we've learned today that really talks about how, like, in benevolence and in kindness, we might actually end up doing more harm than good, and how we can learn to draw some boundaries. And then we just happen to see some boundaries being crossed in action while talking about boundaries. And then, and the interesting part, actually, I learned a new way of looking at this. You need to advocate for your own boundaries. I think that was very, very powerful, right? Advocating for your own boundaries is basically establishing and maintaining your boundaries with people. It's a large part of advocacy. It does take energy, but it is what we need to do to maintain our sense of integrity, I think, right? So that's our sense of boundaries. And so that's what we talked about today. I think that's pretty much a good summary.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan. So thanks everyone for joining us. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I certainly did. This is when the essence of it all comes out through conversation, right? Nothing was exactly planned, but when we come together and we start throwing things out, scenarios, and then it becomes very, very rich. So I hope you join us for the next session. I'm going to have Ethan lead us on the topic of responsibility. So not the responsibility talent team, but more the concept of responsibility and, do we feel responsible for someone else? How do we have personal responsibility and things like that? So that's kind of what we're going to talk about in 2 weeks' time. We have this every alternate week. So I hope to see all of you. And the other thing is this Zoom background that we have. If you'd like me to create one for you, just reach out to me, give your top 5. And then I will just WhatsApp it over to you. So just let me know. It's easy peasy. So when we talk about it, we can all, if your computer can support it. If you can't, that's totally fine as well.
I learned about this on, I think it was a coach's Facebook page, maybe. Is that right? How do I see the future ones you're doing?
Oh,
the coach's page?
So it's based on the meetup group. So I will post it on the other meetup as well. But if you can join the StrengthsFinder Singapore Network meetup, you would
send her the link. Send her the link.
Yeah, I will. Okay, give me a second.
So that she can stay updated on when we're doing this again, right?
Okay. So guys, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to formally end this so that we stop the live stream, and then we can stay on. I'll do all
the bullshit that we want to say. Yeah, go on.
All right. So thanks everyone. For those of you who are online, I'm going to end off, and then we're going to have our. So if you want to have the back end